A pastor and a priest walk into a movie theater. Hi, I'm Father Andrew Miller.
I'm Reverend Michelle Byerly.
And this is A Pastor and a Priest Walk Into a Movie Theater, a podcast about faith, life, and the silver screen. Today we'll be doing our holiday special by discussing the 2005 Christmas family movie, The Family Stone.
For those of you who have not seen it, we recommend doing so before you listen to this podcast. But if you haven't seen it, we hope that you will enjoy the themes that we discuss. Overall, it is about a young woman who comes home to meet her boyfriend's family, and of course there is the family stone, the engagement ring that is hanging in the mix and in the balance. We have the classic comedy of errors and miscommunication, among other things, as we figure out this crazy thing we call life and romance during the Christmas season.
You know, it's interesting. Whenever new Christmas films come out, especially on Hallmark, I always would want to do this comedy trailer of an average, ordinary thing is changed by the magic of this season to become the Christmas Thing, starring Valerie Bertinelli. The Christmas Thing. And to me, if that was going to be the Family Stone, it would be the Christmas Ego. And I think that the real theme in the film is, well, it's ego and personality clash, the need for that people seem to have to rescue each other. And oh, by the way, dear listener, we're joined by our editor, Wesley.
Hello, I was wondering when you were going to get to me.
Oh, yeah. We were hoping that Gail Gallagher could join us as well, but she has a thing. So, but this is our Christmas special, or a holiday special, excuse me. So we've got us all, as many of us as can make it, joining in tonight.
So grab your cup of hot cocoa or eggnog, whatever it is you drink around the holiday. Wassail.
Put some rum in the eggnog, make it into a $5 milkshake. Anyway. So Wesley, what do you think of this film? We actually watched this as opposed to other options at your recommendation, and I'd seen the movie before. I really enjoy. I've always loved the film, but I'm curious what your thoughts are, Wes.
Well, this is one of my family's favorites. We rewatch it every year, partially because Diane Keaton is a big family favorite of ours, and Dermot Mulroney is too. He's one of my mom's favorites. There was a 5 or 6 year period where we would see any movie that Dermot Mulroney was in because he was in it. But also, this is the family, the Stone family that the Family Stone is named after. Also, there is the engagement ring, which is the titular Family Stone that Michelle, but also their last name is Stone. But they're very similar to us, to the Morrisons, in a lot of ways, because they're very, very progressive. They value education, but they also value being down to earth. They have that sort of that ethos of therapeutic ego deflation. If anybody starts getting too full of themselves, they gang up on them. Let a little of that ego out, but also they get full of themselves about not being full of themselves. So.
There's something that Michelle and my CPE supervisor used to tell us to watch out for. How familiar are you, Wesley, with the Myers-Briggs personality test?
I'm familiar enough with it to know that it's one of those things that is supposed to be helpful in the moment, and then you're supposed to let it go, and then so many people take it way too seriously.
Oh, absolutely. And I will say, though, that where this is coming in is the personality scale from the J to the P, the judger, to the perceiver. Perceivers often have a very, very flow with it kind of attitude. So the Stones have very, very strong P's in the Myers-Briggs, and Meredith definitely has a very strong J on the Myers-Briggs. And
but then Sybil, Diane Keaton's character, is very judgy about being a P.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And but where I was going was Michelle and I had a CPE supervisor who used to tell us, those of us who are P's, to watch out that we don't pee on someone else's J. In other words, and I think that's what the Stones are doing. They're keying on Meredith's J. Which is a really, really kind of to their discredit, and I love them very much, is kind of a dick move.
Right.
No. So I have to confess, I resonated a little too much with Meredith because I am a very strong J. And so I can understand. So J's are very regimented, structural. They like things to be a certain way, and kind of the go with the flow is not always super easy for a J. And so I kind of resonated with that sense of going into this world that she has no idea about and trying too hard, really, to be liked and accepted.
Well, but like that's one of the things is that we see that's just the tiniest little 5-second scene of when Sybil comes into the kitchen and the coffee pot isn't there. And a lot of shit has happened, and she's tired, and she doesn't feel good, and she freaks out because the coffee pot's not there. It's supposed to be right there! You empty the pot, you remake it, and the camera pans around, and Meredith, Sarah Jessica Parker's character, is washing it. She finished the pot, she was about to make a new one, but she decided that it was dirty and needed to be washed. Perfectly valid move. And if Sybil had just looked around, it was a considerate act to wash the coffee pot before making another pot of coffee.
Mm-hmm.
But she was regimented and needed her routine, which is part of why I have problems with the Myers-Briggs too.
Oh.
But also that but I am coming to terms over the past year with the fact that I am neurodivergent in ways that I didn't understand. That I need social cues spelled out to me sometimes and social expectations, and I need routine. And if people had just explained to Meredith, we wait to wash the coffee pot until after 11 a.m. or something like that. Or had explained to Sybil, it really grosses out Meredith to not wash the pot between every pot of coffee. Those are little expectations that weren't communicated. Mm-hmm. And in that instance, I'm definitely on the side of Meredith. That, freaking out about washing a pot of coffee? That's not okay. But
yeah. Well, and I think the thing about comedies is so many of them, and dramas, is that they rely on that trope of misunderstanding and miscommunication.
Right.
And so sometimes that drives me batty. Sometimes it's a good lesson in, okay, in real life, how could we communicate about this?
Right.
And I think about this, I consider myself pretty lucky in my family. Our Christmases, to me, are perceived as pretty normal. We don't really get into the big back and forth with each other. I have never really seen an instance of someone new coming in and really getting into it with that new person, and kind of almost a hazing, really. That was something that felt a little uncomfortable to me in this, is that it did feel a little bit like a hazing element. And kind of let's test her out, let's see. And there's some of that we do. We size each other up. We kind of figure out where each other's buttons are. And yet I think about that day, if I ever meet someone that I want to meet their family, or I jokingly say, God forbid, and God bless the person who wants to come home to my house and meet my family, because as normal as I think we are, I can also understand that importance of setting down those, okay, here's how we do things, here's how this works,
To its great credit, this film's use of comedic out there-ness, its use of comedic use of comedic unrealism is minimal. I feel that a lot of the miscommunications that you were talking about, Wesley, are miscommunications that happen all the dang time.
Right.
And I would also say that to Michelle's point, I think it's very, very clear that Sybil and Amy especially did not like Meredith and made that judgment very, very like right off the bat. And I think that the coffee pot was a kind of MacGuffin for them.
Right.
That at the end of the day had who was the son-in-law who was married to Thad?
Let me scroll down. Brian.
Had
Brian White.
Well, had his character,
and he's married to Brad, not Thad, but yeah.
No, Thad is the one who is deaf. Brad Peters is the one who popped Amy's chair.
Oh, right. I'm sorry, I got that wrong. But so Brian White was married to Thad, who's deaf. But if Brian had
Patrick done that, I think Sybil would have been fine, even though it was not against the rules, because they like him, and
that's fair. But also that that misunderstanding played up for laughs. I think that you're right. That was, like, for instance, the big opportunity for that they immediately squashed it and showed we're not doing that in this movie, was when Ben, played by Luke Wilson, who's Everett, the boyfriend who brings her home wanting to get the ring and propose, his brother, Ben, takes Meredith out drinking and realizes she needs a break from the family, needs to cool down, takes her out drinking, doesn't realize that they are all sailors who can drink a keg of ale and be fine, and she has waspy Connecticut alcohol tolerance. So he brings her back to the Stone Manor, which is just normal house, and puts her in his own bed, and then he sleeps on the floor. And she wakes up in the morning as he's coming back in. He doesn't have a shirt on, but he's just showered, and he comes back into his room to get his clothes. And she assumes that they had drunken sex the night before and smacks him and sneaks back out. And she has made this misunderstanding, and she won't talk about it because it's improper. Then there's the gift scene, the Christmas morning gift scene, which I do want to come back to later because it's delightful. But then she freaks out, and immediately Ben Stone says, "No, that's not what happened," and explains the misunderstanding. It's like the standard stereotypical comedy. That misunderstanding would be strung out for 20 more minutes. Mm-hmm. And in this movie, it's 5 minutes and done. And it's solved with forthright honesty. Handled very sensitively by the guy.
Ben is my favorite character by far and away. And the reason why, although he's not the one that I tend to resonate with, I tend to resonate most with Everett, but Ben is the one who knows himself. He's the one who is the most comfortable in his own skin. Yes. And
which is something that the dad, Kelly, played by Craig T. Nelson, talks about.
Yeah, Ben, actually, it's very interesting. Ben, I think, can see right off the bat that Everett and Meredith are not going to work, but he doesn't have this overwhelming need to rescue Everett, whereas the others do. The others are trying to save Everett from himself and to save Meredith from this. But Ben doesn't. Ben's like, let it play out. They'll figure it out. And furthermore, Ben also, I think, knows that he has feelings for Meredith, but he has no need to try to go behind Everett's back and pursue that. He doesn't have of all of them, save perhaps the pregnant sister, he has the least amount of ego, I think.
Oh yeah, Susanna.
Mm-hmm.
She's the pregnant sister, right?
Yes. Susanna.
Because Amy is the youngest sister.
Mm-hmm.
So, And that's one thing that I find interesting, and it's another place where it sort of resonates with my family, that Amy, played by Rachel McAdams, who's another one of my favorite actresses, she's the youngest of the Stone family, but she is sort of the next in line to be the Stone matriarch, which sort of follows in the Morrison clan also. My younger sister, Kylie, who's the youngest of us 3 siblings, is really, she is more like my mother than my older sister is. I play the matriarch / patriarch figure more, but if it were going to be one of my sisters, and I'm the middle child, then it would be my younger sister more than my older sister. So,
Michelle, who did you resonate most with?
Well, I told you, I thought it was Meredith, played by Sarah Jessica Parker. You know, I mean, and I liked these other characters too. Like, I liked Rachel McAdams' character, Amy. But, you know, each character is very human in that they have their good sides, they have their major flaws.
Yeah, no, and I really enjoyed the special relationship that Amy had with Sybil that was augmented in the gift scene when the pregnant Sybil, and I cry every time she says it. She says, "It's you and me, kid. It's you and me." Mm-hmm. I cry. That makes, and because I mean Amy and Sybil are really, I think, peas in a pod. They're very, very
right.
And I think you're right that they're setting Amy up as the next matriarch. If there's ever to be a sequel to The Family Stone, which there shouldn't be, because why would there be? Then I think Amy is going to be.
Well, we see that in the final scene of the movie when they're setting up the tree the next year, and everybody's arriving for the Christmas the next year, and Amy is in the position of holding house while the family is arriving. Mm-hmm. That Sybil was the year previously. And she has the streak of gray at her temple.
Yeah.
That Sybil did. That has manifested over the previous year that we didn't see.
You know, I just noticed that this time I've seen the film many times, but I just noticed that this time that Amy looks a lot older in that scene. And it's only been a year, but she looks maybe 5-10 years older. I think I'm convinced that's intentional on the part of filmmakers.
Well, but all the stuff that happened that year that we know happened,
and then Amy
managed, but that we didn't get to. That Amy, being the new matriarch, mm-hmm. had to be in charge of.
Yeah.
And this is spoiler alert, listeners. Everybody at the Stone gathering for this Christmas knows.
Everybody knows.
So everybody in the family knows. Meredith does not know, and at this point, by Christmas Eve, Meredith's sister Julie has arrived also, because Meredith asked her to come because she was so uncomfortable. So all of the Stones know that Diane Keaton's character, Sybil, her breast cancer has returned. And she has already had a radical double mastectomy and gone through chemo. And at this point, there's nothing else they can do. It's terminal. And they all have a tacit agreement that nobody's spoken not to talk about it until after Christmas. So there's this pall hanging over the family.
Yes. There's an elephant in the room.
Right. So Christmas morning arrives, and Meredith is freaking out because she thinks she had drunken sex with her boyfriend's brother. And she brings out these gifts, these professionally wrapped, which doesn't fit with the hodgepodge of, like, newspaper wrapped, scotch taped gifts under the present, and they're all identical, and she hands them out to everybody, and they open them up, and they're these gorgeous black and white artsy photographs that, as Andrew said, are
Sybil pregnant with Amy. And everybody is just stunned into silence, crying. Because it's this, she is, and they're actual photos of Diane Keaton. I looked it up on IMDb last time I watched it. It's an actual picture of Diane Keaton pregnant. That they
Dear listeners, correction, Diane Keaton, the actress, has never been pregnant. For this movie, they took an old picture of Diane Keaton and digitally altered it to make her look pregnant.
Sarah and Meredith, not knowing what's going on, thinks that they're upset and mad and sad at her. And when Sybil turns to Amy and says, "That's you and me, kid," Meredith freaks out because she took the photo off of Everett's desk and took it to a professional photo technician to be copied and blown up to make these gifts for the family. And so she had no reason to think that this photo of his pregnant mother would be of his mother pregnant with his younger sister. I mean, that's a perfectly valid assumption. So she freaks out. She starts screaming at Ben. The whole thing comes out, and then she starts sobbing, "Why can't anyone love me?" And she runs into the kitchen. And Amy and Sybil get up to go after her. And that's the moment, that gift, where they're like, oh, she did this incredibly sensitive, caring thing for us. And it means so much to us. And the matriarch and the matriarch in waiting go after her. And that's when the slapstick comedy comes in, because she's going to get the casserole that she prepared the night before for the family's breakfast. And the way the kitchen is set up, they come in the kitchen door and smack into the fridge door that she's behind, so the casseroles slosh all over her and spill all over the floor. And finally, at that point, Meredith's waspy Connecticut exterior is cracked, so she's crying and screaming and hurling insults at them that have been bottling up for 3 days, or however long she's been there. And Sybil and Amy are finally willing to hear her, and they're like, "Yes, you're right! and so, like, we hear it. "What's so great about all of you? Nothing! It's just we're all we have." That was the line that got me. It's just, we're all we have. But then what I like is that somebody got a cut, and they needed to call an ambulance. And, Brad, who, as you said, popped Amy's cherry, they met up with him the night before, Ben and Meredith, at the bar that Ben took Meredith to. And she told him that he needed to come by the next day. So he arrives.
Please be Amy, please be Amy, please be Amy.
Right, and, I don't remember the exact timeline, but he gives Amy a gift also. And it's a snow globe. And I don't know if there was a deleted scene or something, or if it was just a really pretty snow globe. I don't remember the explanation. But she has a very similar reaction to that gift. That it was very well thought out, that she really appreciated it, and that it unlocked the relationship that she needed to have with him. So I liked that sort of like that. It was sort of two gift of the Magi moments. Both from the gospel and from the fairy tale.
And right thereafter they start singing Silent Night.
So neither of them were extremely valuable gifts materially, but they were thoughtful, emotional gifts. So, and they unlocked the communication that needed to happen. So.
Celebration of the love language of
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
So, and I think one of the things that resonates about Meredith in terms of unlocking emotion and that kind of thing is, you know, there's this assumption with people who have this very hard exterior that they're uncaring, unfeeling, when actually many of them are some of the deepest feeling people, and they have locked it down because if they feel, it will tear their heart apart.
Vulcans.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. or Tolkien's elves.
Yeah.
Yes. No, I what resonates for me about the character of Everett is that he's so unsure of himself, and that he plays a similar role in his family to the role that I played in my family. The overachiever, but who doesn't really know what he wants. And it really took me a long time to really discover that about myself, to discover that, you know, getting good grades and, you know, acing the next quiz was not the be all end all of schooling, and getting the best career, and that it just wasn't, in the grand scheme of things, all that important. And it took me a long time to stop acting out of pure obligation and start acting out of a sense of what I wanted in life. So it resonated with me.
Well, and did they ever actually straight up say what Everett's job is?
No, I think it's implied that he has a very high powered job, that he's in the corporate world, and he's well paid for it.
But I mean, it sort of feels similar to Chandler on Friends. That he's like it's the generic corporate job that he doesn't care about that much.
Well, even
that he's doing it because it's what he's supposed to do. Which feeds back into what you're saying, that he doesn't know himself as well as he should, and as well as his family wants him to.
And that's why he's attracted to religion, too. He's attracted. In fact, he's on a business trip that he diverts in order to go and pilgrimage to a holy site of Buddhism. And that's where he meets Meredith. And I think Meredith kind of, I think the reason why he's attracted to Meredith is Meredith acts as a kind of grounding for him. That he has all of these, head in the clouds, lofty ambitions, not so much material ambitions, but, you know, spiritual ambitions. And I think she kind of grounds him. And then I think it's in meeting, and I'm not sure how I feel about this storyline, but, you know, it's what it is. It's in meeting his sister that he kind of realizes that he can let himself go.
You mean her sister?
That's
Julie.
right, meeting her sister, Julie, the Claire Danes' character.
Yeah. But I think that what's interesting is that Ben is similarly attracted and grounded by Meredith, but more honestly. I don't know if that's a good word.
Ben knows himself, and Ben knows Meredith.
Ben knows, right? So his attraction to her is based on his actual personality, as opposed to the personality he's constructed because he thinks that's what he should be. Whereas opposed to Everett's...
Ben has no facade. He is just who he is.
That's it. Yeah. So that, as I was talking about that final scene of, where we see Amy as the matriarch with the gray streak, that, as you talked about, that she's aged 5 years in 1 year because she's had to deal with her mother dying, planning the funeral. But the other things that we haven't seen is Everett and Sarah breaking up, Sarah and Ben getting together, Everett and Julie getting together, Susanna giving birth, because the baby is there, Patrick and Thad adopting their baby. So much has happened in the family stone in that year. in that intervening year.
Right.
So, and it's all stuff that needed to happen, but it must have been exhausting.
About Patrick and Thad, because it seems to me that that there's more there than just, well, they're the gay couple, and Thad happens to be Dad.
But actually, I think that's what makes them so powerful.
Hmm.
Is that it's not that they're trying to make them this token big, they don't make a big deal out of their relationship, it just is. You know, I think to me, that's the power of that relationship.
Hmm.
But that's just my thinking.
I agree. And as the gay character, I agree. But also, I wanted to, I'm bringing up, Patrick is the outsider. But he's the embraced outsider.
Yes.
He's the spouse there. Because Susanna's husband isn't there. John Truesdale only gets there Christmas Day. I forget why.
It's because Meredith invited him.
No, the husband of the pregnant daughter.
Sorry.
He doesn't arrive till Christmas Day. Susanna, the pregnant daughter, is talking to him on the phone throughout the movie. They have a very strong, close, good relationship, but he arrives and his first line is, "Okay, so first things first, who's the guy that Amy's making out with in the ambulance?" And I love that opening line.
Yeah.
But like, I wonder how things would have been, but like, back to Patrick, he was consistently Meredith's ally. 'Cause he knew what it was like to walk into the Stone house as the courter, trying to get permission to enter the family. And he repeatedly says something along the lines of, "All right, Sybil, chill." He's the one who invites Meredith to make the strata, which then ends up knocked all over her and the kitchen floor. And yeah. So
yeah, Patrick is Sybil and Meredith's go-between, because I feel that both Patrick and Thad resonate in the family dynamic very well with Sybil, especially Thad. I think Thad shares, and I see this in the scene where they're buying the ring, and Thad says, "Don't do it." I see in Thad, or I see Thad as possessing that sense of Sybil's need to rescue. And although I will say that I think a lot of Sybil's need to rescue, I think is perhaps a personality trait, but I think also perhaps a sense in which, she's dying and she's scared, and she's not so much scared for her own mortality as she is scared that she won't be there to save everyone from themselves.
That her family won't be okay without her?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But also, someone did need to say that to Everett. Someone that he was going to listen to more than Sybil.
Well, and it ends up being, although he didn't hear it from Thad, he ironically enough ends up hearing it from Sybil herself. And I think what ends up enabling Sybil to say it to him in a way that he'll hear is Craig T. Nelson's character, the father, that Craig T. Nelson has to enable Sybil to fear, or to let go of her fear and give him the ring, right? Give Everett the ring. And once she does that, once she lets go, she's able to say what needs to be said in a way that isn't judgmental or rescuing, but simply a statement of where she is in the moment.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then he puts the ring on Julie's finger.
And it gets stuck.
Right.
Which I think is, again, it's another comedic moment, but it's really interesting the symbolism of it and how it reveals something to them. You know, it's like why was this even on your finger in the first place?
Right, and that reaction of Meredith when she sees the ring on Julie's finger, and it's that reaction. That's it. And I mean, there's layers of that reaction that I want to unpack, because the initial reaction is materialistic fashionista working in a fashion, and she sees this ring that's been passed down, and it is a gorgeous ring. Sorry, fanboy twink gay boy moment. It is a gorgeous ring, but it's not a huge ring, and it's a very simple ring. It's a square cut diamond on a simple gold band. And she knows enough about fashion that she knows that this antique, nice ring is a good ring. So I think that her reaction of that's it goes deeper than just like disappointment in the aesthetic of the ring to what the relationship with Dermot Mulroney's character, forget blanking on his name, Everett, that's more of the reaction of, that's more of a reaction to Everett than to the ring.
Yeah. I would agree.
Yeah, and to
me, that's the moment that seals it, that, yeah, she was not the right person to receive it.
Mm-hmm. And that Everett's right to the ring is that he's the eldest.
What do we think about the dinner scene? And
whew. You know, to me, it feels so familiar, and just from the sense of, you know, ultimately underneath it all, she is very, as Wesley has used the term, waspy. I think she likes to think that she's more open-minded than she is, and she just keeps digging her mouth more and more, digging a hole with her words, and revealing her true biases underneath. And it's a hard thing, because I think she wants to have good intentions, as so many do. But that's the problem, is that, you know, your intentions versus how it's received.
And actual impact in the world.
Right.
The experience...
I've said that in arguments, even with both of you, is that if you're doing actual harm, your intentions don't matter.
Yeah. And so at once it was very uncomfortable, and yet it was also, this is probably what it feels like for someone to be held to account. For them, it probably feels like attacking. But I also, you know, it's after that I think Ben takes her out and sits with her. And I think that's, to me, that's an important piece of it. You can't just tear someone down for where they're at.
You have to build them back afterwards.
Exactly. Yes.
The film,
and I think that's... Go ahead, Andrew. It's your turn.
Well, I know I was wondering if the film actually kind of misses an opportunity to discuss that in a little bit more detail, in the sense that, and I'm referring to the discussion that she has with Ben at the bar, in which she protests and is defensive and says, "I love the gays," and Ben says, "Oh, they know that." Whereas I feel like that's sort of a missed opportunity for a deeper discussion in which she can perhaps process a little bit more of what it looks like to have latent prejudice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but I think he does touch on that a bit when with the line, "You have a freak flag, you just don't fly it." That but also that, back to that point that we've touched on a couple times, the movie contains but doesn't show the year after. That she and her sister, Meredith and Julie, both join the Stone Clan and go through that year of hell that must have followed. and they make that choice and do that work. It's just not shown in the film.
Fair enough. I have a lot of sympathy with Meredith's experience of being called out, because I've been called out, and it's not a pleasant experience. On the other hand, it's I don't know, but I would imagine far less pleasant to be on the business end of real prejudice.
Yeah.
But I also want to point out the story that, okay, so for the listener who may not have seen the film, what they're talking about is that Sybil, they're telling stories of Sybil as a mother when they were kids, especially to the Thad, the gay son, pulling them all aside and asking them, "Are you gay?" So Thad found that comforting, that he didn't have to come out to her. But my grandmother, my dad's mother, had a similar thing with me, that when she found out I was gay, I didn't tell her, my dad told her, and I didn't want him to. The next time I was with her, she pulled me aside and said, "I always knew." And that wasn't comfort. That was, the word that's coming to mind, but it was pedantic, but it's not right. She was talking down to me.
Patronizing?
Patronizing. That's it. Thank you. My other grandmother, my mom's mom, whom I love, the true matriarch of the clan, she posted a thing of, "I don't want my kids to come out to me. I don't, gay or straight, I just want them to show up with their significant other and introduce them. And I'll say, 'Oh, cool. You want mashed potatoes or French fries with dinner tonight?' And it's like, that's the reaction I want." And like Sybil was going on, "Yeah, I wanted all my sons to be gay so that they would never leave me." And I was like, that is messed up. But it's messed up in a way different from what Meredith reacted to. Meredith reacted that she doesn't think anyone would want their kid to be gay because nobody would want them to go through the world with any disadvantage. And that's messed up too. But wanting your kid to never leave you? So squicky.
Yeah. Yeah, that Sybil...
That's just...
codependency.
That's just as bad. Yeah, that's codependent. That's just like assuming that your youngest daughter will never marry and will be the spinster who lives with you and takes care of you in your old age. It's creepy and wrong.
It opens up...
Sybil... It's reverse Oedipal.
It does open up a sense in which one might see Sybil's death as redemptive, although painful and horrid. And this is not to suggest that Sybil is a bad person, but it is to suggest that sometimes a generation has to die in order for the new generation to become to grow into itself. Because I would not imagine, especially her relationship with Amy, the matriarch in waiting. I have difficulty imagining that relationship would have been very healthy had it continued much longer. Am I making sense there?
Mm-hmm. But the other thing is, I think that some of that codependency Sybil has outgrown before the movie.
Some.
They just don't call it out.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that's seen in her relationship with Patrick. That Patrick went through a very, very similar, although not as intense, I imagine, experience as Meredith went through when he joined the family. But he came to be accepted, and I think you're right. I think she's grown a lot in the moments leading up to the film. On the other hand, I think it's her illness that's kind of leading her to decompensate a little bit.
And that's fair. I'm on disability because I went through an extremely severe illness 3 or 4 years ago or so, and being sick sucks. So,
And her illness is driving most of the narrative, quite frankly. You know, it's that, like I said earlier, it's that unspoken elephant in the room that if they would just name it, it's driving a lot of the angst over this new person. Is she adequate? About the relationships, about her relationship with Everett.
There's a key line between Ben and his father, in which I think reveals some of the lack of health there in the relationship between not just Sybil but the two parents and their children. Oh, by the way, listener, I'm not trying to sound as judgmental as I'm sure I'm coming off. Every single family has this kind of baggage. There's nothing shameful about it. It's just there. But his father says to Ben, "We wanted to wait till after Christmas to tell you kids." In other words, there's a sense in which both he and Sybil, and this is, I'm sure, quite natural, don't see them as adults, but still see them as kids to be raised and rescued. And so, and I think that also speaks to some of the antagonism between they and Ben, because Ben, I think, resists that. So.
Right. And I mean, that's interesting that I've talked a lot about my family, that we have the naming convention, and it's been somewhat subconscious, and I've been trying to be more conscious about it when referring to the different households. I've been trying to move away from referring to them by like one group of cousin being Tim and Celeste's kids, and one group being Rob and Denise's kids, and instead it's been the Bellevue bunch and the Papillion posse. And my sisters and I we're the ones that it's the easiest because we're the Morrison Sloats instead of just the Morrisons, because we have that hyphenated last name. But we can't be an alliteration based on what community of Omaha, because we've moved around so much. But then my mom and her siblings, we don't really have that option, because they also grew up moving around everywhere. So it's like they're Bill and Nona's kids, even though they're the generation above us. But that's interesting because the last time I was referring to them as a group and used that moniker, I was talking about the fact that I was really admiring and I was hoping I was inheriting the fact that they all went gray very well. All of them, they looked very good after their hair went gray. But I said, I like how Bill and Nona's kids went gray. And so it's like that. I did call them kids, and then I talked about one of the signs in our society of getting older. So
I wonder what we all think of the father's, the patriarch character.
I think I find him to be a rather layered character. I mean, as many of them are. He also kind of comes off as more even-keeled and laid back, more sympathetic to Meredith, I think. And he's kind of the one who's trying to do some smoothing of the edges a little bit.
A wizened version of Ben, perhaps?
I think so. Yeah, that would be a fair assessment.
There's a sense in which I feel... Go ahead.
I like that he's very much a patriarch. He's one of the leaders of the clan, but he's not the traditional patriarch as in he's in charge. If you going to another of my favorite family movies, Big Fat Greek Wedding, this sort of has the reverse of that speech that the mom gives. The man may be the head of the house, but the woman is the neck.
And
in this
she
case,
can turn the head.
You need to get married. You're starting to look old.
Right. But in this case, Sybil, the matriarch, is the head, and Kelly, the patriarch is the neck. And he's very comfortable with that, and he's okay with that. And their dynamic works most of the time.
There's a sense in which even that doesn't get around some of the problems of patriarchy. Because, well, I wonder, yes, she's the head and he's the neck, or is it that she's the one who gets shit done? There are a lot of families, and maybe the Stones aren't like this, I don't know, but there are a lot of families in which, even though the men, and this is especially true in my family, the men take on the role of headship, it's really the women who do everything. All of the mental labor, all of the reproductive labor. And I imagine in that year...
Sounds like the church.
Yes. And I imagine in that year that follows that Amy must have just taken care of everything. And I imagine, and I think part of it is that he's probably grieving and he just needs to check out in his grief. But I imagine that there's a sense in which he's the old dad character that we all have to kind of take care of. Although I don't know if that's fair, but I wonder.
I mean, there's a lot of assumptions going in there.
Yeah.
My assumptions are that from that very brief thing, that I honestly think probably Patrick, Amy, Brad, and John are that the spouses step in and take care, and that all of the core Stones are devastated. That the spouses come in and take care of them. Amy comes into her role as matriarch. I don't really think that Brad is the new patriarch. I think honestly that Kelly would stay as patriarch. He'd be in his mourning period, definitely. But it's sort of like in my mind, it's sort of like old royalty where the king dies and the king's son takes over, but the king's son's wife is still the princess, and it's the king and the queen mother, or the dowager empress. Only it's now the matriarch and the dowager the patriarch, although dowager is a feminine adjective. There's not really a masculine adjective that's the equivalent, because patriarchy. So I don't know. This is all assumptions that we're making because that year after isn't shown, but that's part of why the movie is good, that it knows when to stop talking.
Yes.
And it says so much. I love that ending scene because of those details that we've talked about, where it points to all of those things. So, did you notice the fact that Amy is the one who's wearing the mother's wedding ring?
The mother's wedding ring or the grandmother's wedding ring?
The mother's.
Yeah, I didn't catch that, but she's wearing the stone.
Yeah.
I get the impression that Everett and I this comes from me seeing so much myself in Everett. I think Everett and Julie are together, but I don't think that they're as serious as perhaps a true shippers would want them to be, because I think Everett's still trying to figure himself out. But I get the impression that I get the impression that Brad and Amy have tied the knot or are engaged.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because he comes up to Amy and gives her a cup of something, cocoa or cider or coffee or something. And I think that you're right. I think that potentially Everett and Amy might not be married or together.
But Everett and Julie?
Everett and Julie. But even if they're not, at that point, Julie is family.
Mm-hmm.
I think Meredith and Ben are definitely together.
Yeah.
So, But Julie would be family of the Stones, regardless.
Through Meredith,
I mean, she's
at least.
family of the through Meredith, but also because of going through the previous Christmas and bonding with family and shared principles and shared values.
I would want to see the movie where Mr. and Mrs. Stone meet Mr. and Mrs. Morton. I think that would be a funny movie.
Right.
Julian.
But I think that would be but I think that would be of significantly lower quality and impact. I think that would be sort of like watching My Big Fat Greek Life after watching My Big Fat Greek Wedding. So,
whoever answers this question is the one to whom the question is directed. If you were writing a sermon on this, what would the takeaway be for the congregation? And the introverts think.
Well, I guess following that comment, talk.
Oh, okay. The importance of letting things play out, and trusting that it will be all right.
I mean, I guess the talk, let your freak flag fly, which is really hard to say. I don't know how.
Oh, I'm sorry. You said
to do it after 3 beers.
I thought you were saying after that let the introvert or hear the and now the introverts think comment. Andrew, you better talk, damn it. Or I thought that was direct. I'm sorry.
I meant my sermon would be on the topic of talk, let your freak flag fly. That so much of the drama of the movie, so much of the conflict and crisis is driven by people not wanting to talk.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about earlier that there's the one brief poking fun at the standard comedy trope of misunderstanding, but then they squash it and sort of poke fun at that comedies that let misunderstandings play farther than they would in real life. But that nobody wants to talk about Sybil being sick.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to talk about the fact that Everett is living a life fundamentally against the grain of his true self. Nobody wants to talk about the fact that while Meredith might be in a career that she really enjoys, well, I mean, everybody talks about it, but nobody talks to her about it. That while she might be in a career that she really enjoys, she's not living a life that she really enjoys. Nobody wants to talk to Amy about the fact that she is stalled, that she hasn't really grown up. Nobody wants to talk to Sybil about the fact that she is decompensating and grasping at controlling things that can't be controlled. And really the only person I see who takes the bulls by the horn and talks when the talking needs to be done is Ben.
Agreed.
But he also knows when not to talk. That dinner scene, he didn't talk to Meredith and try to get her to shut up or tell her why she was wrong. He waited. And it's because he knew that the only way that he could be the comforter, the rebuilder, was not to be one of the people kicking her. And then he swooped in and took her to the bar. So,
I think I would bring this up if I were talking about, Joseph being told, finding out that his betrothed is pregnant, and then Mary going to visit Elizabeth, and just to me, these crazy family dynamics that we have, and just talking about how the holidays can bring that out, and what's important to you as a family, what ultimately brings you together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, along with what you had talked about, Wesley. So.
Well, and I guess the maybe a thematic from a theater perspective, the signing as the American Sign Language used as symbolism with that, because there is the character, the deaf character, Thad, and he can speak, that he's learned from lip reading and probably a speech therapist, but every stone, and obviously Patrick, his husband, and even John, Susanna's husband, when he gets there, knows ASL. And when he's in the room, they automatically sign as they speak. It's built in. So they have that. So to me, that's a symbol of how important communication is to them.
Yes.
But during this moment of crisis, they have all made this tacit agreement not to communicate, which everyone does. It's human failing. It's a standard bit of our mortality. Because we haven't talked about it yet, and it's a tradition, Andrew, original sin.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Failure to communicate, an original sin.
Original failure. What we have here is an original failure to communicate. I don't really have much to say about it other than
and my usual interpretation that Adam and Eve hide away instead of communicating with God.
And yet there's also a sense, and there's a tension in the film between under communication and over communication, because there's a sense. I read what Meredith is doing in the dinner scene is over communicating. I mean, she's trying to save herself. She's trying to rescue herself from the hole that she's dug, and it'd be better if she shuts up and lets it go.
Right.
In fact, there are a number of times in the moment which the Stones invite her to do just that. Well, let's just let it go.
Right, like she talks about, she has that line, Diane, or Sybil, one of the few times where she behaves gracefully towards Meredith before the picture scene. She says, Meredith is saying something, well, they think they've identified this gene, but nobody knows what it does. And Sybil pops in, well, don't they think that it's about window treatments?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, she made this joke that was the perfect opportunity for Meredith to stop talking.
Yeah. And let it go. And I think that therein lies the genius of the character of Ben, because he knows when to speak and he knows when to shut up. He has a kind of he's an embodiment of that kind of Buddhist detachment, that kind of stoic detachment of, yes, I know when to abound and when to be in poverty. I know when to come in and say what needs to be said. I also know that it's okay to just sit back and let it flow and just kind of let it go.
What's that the song For Everything There Is a Season? It comes from that Ecclesiastes.
For everything there is a season, a time, and a purpose under heaven. Sure. Time to be born at 9.
A time to gather stones.
And a time to throw stones. But a time to speak and a time to be silent.
Right. It reminds me of some conversation I was having with a group of friends my senior year of high school. And a friend, his name was Brandon, and I loved him dearly, but he was not socially graceful, and he was saying something, and we were all trying to get him to stop, and I finally turned to him and said, Brandon, stop talking, put the shovel down. And he responded with the perfect joke, because he said, but I want to see China! And then he changed the subject.
That's another great...
But then he changed the subject, and it was one of those, because he acknowledged that he was wrong, and he made the joke at his expense. So.
That's another great lesson in this film, as well as in the Jenny Slate special, as well as comedy in general, that comedy has the wonderful ability to confront as well as disarm at the same time. Yeah. It doesn't need to be anesthetizing. It can confront the truth of the situation while at the same time disarming and allow people to kind of get, step back, process, and be okay with the truth of what's going on. So.
Yeah. It can be astringent.
Yes.
It can be like pouring a little bit of rubbing alcohol in the wound. It makes it sting more for a moment, but then the wound is clean and feels better.
Yeah, and you get to the point at which you're like, oh God, that was so stupid.
So I can still hear his voice, but I want to see China.
There's one final thing I'd like to mention. There's a great irony in the last scene when they all get angry at Ben that to me really drives home the point about Ben's character. At the end of the day, and this is the moment where Everett takes off at him, and where Ben's like, "What did I do?" And the father's like, "Oh, you did plenty, mister," and all that. It isn't because he allegedly slept with Meredith. It's because he didn't sleep with Meredith. In other words, what they're so angry about him for is that he presented them with the truth of the situation. They're angry at him in the same way that people are angry with a prophet.
Right. And like they're and what finally disarms it is they're rolling around. Everett and Ben are rolling around, and Ben goes, "You don't even love her, man. You don't even love her." And that finally gets through the shell. So you were saying that we were saying earlier that first Sybil tells him not to do it, and then Thad tells him not to do it, and then Sybil says, "I don't think you should do it, but ultimately it's your choice." And those are the chipping away at the armor. But what finally gets through that hole is Ben.
Well, it's interesting though. He's already made the call not to marry her, but I think you're right in the sense that this is what convinces him that of just how deeply wrong he was, and just how deeply off mark he was. I think he's been convinced that I shouldn't marry her, but maybe. And then when Ben says you don't even love her, you're right. You're right. I never even loved her. Jeez, what the hell was I doing?
Mm-hmm.
So we've got about 7 minutes and 3 seconds. Michelle, do you want to do the outro, or?
I suppose I can do it.
Or do you want to make a brilliant point, which I'm sure you like?
Oh gosh. No, it was just I have to admit, rom-coms are not usually my normal cup of tea. But the more that I watch different ones, the more I'm like, yeah, okay, there's some intelligent truth to some of them. So this was definitely a good one to get into with that. So
was this a rom-com?
Well, I would call that into question, because I mean, what the only real rom-com I would say in it is like the maybe E-line storyline of Brad and Amy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, and
otherwise it's a family comedy,
and Julie and Ben, or not Julie and Ben, and Meredith and Ben. But there's something interesting. I just thought of this in our conversation, but I've come to the conclusion that Julie and Everett are not together at all. They're friends, and that when they go and hang out at that party around New Year's, they do so as friends. That they don't get together. They don't become lovers. They're just friends. And they even hint at that. Hey guys, it's Uncle Everett. They don't say, hey guys, it's Uncle Everett and Aunt Julie, or hey guys, it's Everett and Julie. They don't treat them as a couple. It's just Everett. And by the way, Julie's there too.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
Right. I mean, Michelle, you've come to a couple of family gatherings when we were in college together, and
Mm-hmm.
that was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because my family was closer than yours. So.
Right. And I adore your family.
Yes, and they adore you. So.
Aww. And I had to laugh earlier when you were talking about the youngest daughter being the spinster staying home caring for the parents, because I am the youngest daughter, the only child, unfortunately. So, anyway.
Yeah.
Well, dear listener, it has been a joy to have you on today. I hope that you have a great holiday, whichever holiday you celebrate. And most of all, you remember your family and those relationships that matter to you the most. We thank you for joining us in our family of theology, nerdery, and community. And we hope that you will join us again through our Facebook page, through our support us through the Patreon at NFNM, and just check out all of our shows, from Pastor and a Priest to Faith in What Resonates, Breaking Fast with Saint Sparklebear, and Faith in the Dice, and all of the other shows that we are working on and bringing to you. We are so grateful that you are with us, and we invite you to like, share, subscribe, support in all the ways that you can, and most of all, have a wonderful holiday season.